It was 9:34 on a Monday night in Syracuse, New York. A woman was dead inside a home on Roney Road, shot so many times that the officers who found her couldn't identify her from her face. An 11-year-old boy was dead beside her. But here is the detail that changes everything. Before he died, that boy was still breathing, still struggling to stay conscious. He reached for his phone, called his mother, and died while still on the phone with her. The man who pulled that trigger was his father. David Huff had lived on Roney Road in Syracuse for years. His neighbor, Laverne McInnes, had known him since 2009. She described him as helpful, friendly. He used to cut her grass without being asked. She trusted him around her home, around her family. Great family, she said. Very helpful, very friendly. And from where she stood, that was true. Huff had no serious criminal record. One minor charge from a few years back, unrelated to any violence. Nothing that would make a neighbor look twice. Nothing that would raise a flag anywhere. He lived with his stepfather, Charles O'Donnell, at 128 Roney Road. He had an older son, Garrett Smith, from a previous relationship. His 11-year-old son, Jeremiah, lived with his mother but spent time with his dad. By the DA's own account, the custody arrangement appeared amicable, and he had a new girlfriend, a woman named Yeraldith Tschudy, 6 months in. From the outside, David Huff was an unremarkable man, ordinary, someone you'd wave at across the yard and think nothing of. But Jeremiah's mother, Samantha Gallup Peltier, knew a different version of him. For years, she had lived in fear of his unpredictable behavior. She would later tell a courtroom that she had come to terms with the possibility that he might one day kill her. She had made peace with it. What she never once imagined was that he would harm their son. David Huff also had a history of drug dependency that ran deeper than anyone outside his closest circle knew. His prosecutor would later say he had spent his life choosing drugs over everything else, over the people who still gave him grace. On the night of March 17, 2025, he was high on Molly, also known as MDMA, a synthetic drug that produces stimulant and hallucinogenic effects. His defense attorney would later say Huff believed he was hearing voices, that he had a psychotic break, but that night had given no warning, no argument anyone heard, no sign that anything was different. Just 4 people in a house. 3 of them didn't know it yet. St. Patrick's Day. Monday, March 17, 2025. 4 people inside the house. At some point that evening, David Huff picked up a Remington 870 Express 12-gauge shotgun. He fired first at Yeraldith, multiple rounds. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick described the scene days later. There were multiple shots to both victims. It's difficult to make a facial identification as a result of the carnage. Then he turned the gun on his son. Jeremiah was shot multiple times. One of those rounds hit him in the head at close range. Then Huff pointed the gun at Charles O'Donnell and pulled the trigger. The gun jammed, or it ran out of ammunition. Nobody knows which for certain. What is certain is that Charles O'Donnell survived only because of a mechanical failure. Nothing else. If that gun had fired, there would have been 3 bodies in that house. And then, in that house, Jeremiah reached for his phone. He was 11 years old, shot multiple times, and he was still fighting. He called his mother. Samantha picked up. She called 911. She got in her car and drove toward her son as fast as she could. She didn't make it in time. Jeremiah died on the phone with her. Syracuse Police Chief Joseph Cecile spoke about it at a press conference days later. It's so poignant, he said, to think about, that he's still in this house with this man, his father, with a loaded gun, and he's reaching out to the one person he can still depend on. Officers arrived at 9:34. They found Jeremiah and Yeraldith dead at the scene. David Huff was gone. What followed was 16 hours of searching. Law enforcement spread across Onondaga County. Helicopters swept the area. A tip came in from Huff's own family. They thought he might show up at a home on Shaver Avenue in North Syracuse. Officers got there. He wasn't there. The search pushed through the night and into the morning with no sign of him. And then came the detail that nobody expected. David Huff had walked 2 miles down the road and let himself into Upstate Community Hospital. He found an empty examination room. He lay down and went to sleep. A hospital staff member found him there, told him to leave, followed him out the door, flagged his behavior to authorities. But it was the public that ended the manhunt. Someone saw a post about the double homicide on social media. Someone recognized the face. 3 separate citizens called in tips. New York State Police found David Huff the next morning, Tuesday, March 18th, walking on West Seneca Turnpike, barely 2 miles from the house where he had left 2 bodies the night before. 9:30 in the morning, 16 hours after the murders. His arrest was caught on camera. 2 days later, Huff stood in Syracuse City Court. The room was packed. Family members of both victims filled every seat. When he walked in, they did not stay quiet. People were on their feet shouting, calling him a coward, demanding justice. He pleaded not guilty. Outside the courthouse, Samantha Gallup-Peltier stood in front of reporters. She didn't want to take questions. But she found the words. She talked about who Jeremiah was, the skateboarding, the fishing, the coffee on the couch in the morning. She said he loved every animal and being outside and his father. Then she asked one thing of everyone listening. Please don't stop saying his name. His name is Jeremiah, Jeremiah Huff. We will miss him every day, and my life is empty. The DA had more to say. Huff hadn't stopped at 2 victims. He had pointed that shotgun at his stepfather and pulled the trigger. Charles O'Donnell was alive only because the gun had given out. An attempted murder charge was coming, and the motive? Still nothing. This little boy and this poor woman, Fitzpatrick said, were shot apparently for absolutely nothing. Defense attorney Sean Chase laid out his position from day one. This wasn't going to be a debate about what happened. Everyone agreed on what happened. The question was how and why, and he wasn't ready to answer that yet. The months that followed were slow. Mental health evaluations were ordered. Huff was placed under constant one-on-one supervision at the Onondaga County Justice Center, dressed in anti-suicide safety clothing. In May of 2025, a grand jury returned a 5-count indictment, 3 murder counts, a second-degree attempted murder charge for the attack on Charles O'Donnell, a weapons charge. In October of 2025, prosecutors made their offer, plead guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder, 40 years to life. Huff asked for time. More months passed. Then the mental health conclusions came in. Multiple experts had evaluated him. Their finding was consistent. David Huff was competent to stand trial. Whatever mental state he was in on the night of the murders was the result of his own voluntary drug use. Not a diagnosis, not a condition that shifted responsibility away from him. The insanity defense was finished before it ever began. A trial date was set for May 2026. David Huff would never see that trial. April 28, 2026, Onondaga County Court. Huff entered to plead guilty. The families of Jeremiah and Yeraldith were in the room. Judge Theodore Limpert began reading the charges aloud, and David Huff started to smile. The smile spread. He laughed to himself, raised his eyebrows, shook his head like something had genuinely amused him. Limpert stopped. "Do you find this funny?" "No, there's a joke stuck in my head. Go on, I'm listening." Nobody moved. Limpert continued. He reached the detail about Jeremiah, shot multiple times, including once in the head. Huff's demeanor shifted. He pushed back. Jeremiah was not shot in the head by any means. His own older son, Garrett Smith, sitting in that courtroom, shouted at his father that he was embarrassing himself. Huff eventually gave in. "I'm guilty of all that. Whatever you guys say I'm guilty of, I'm guilty." Outside the court, prosecutor Robert Moran was direct. "He was shot in the head. Moran said, "and I would imagine if you have that memory in your head, it would be hard to admit publicly that you did that to your 11-year-old boy. But I could not care less what he thinks. I'm focused on Jeremiah. I'm focused on Miss Tschudy." Sentencing was set for May 29th. May 29th, 2026. The courtroom was full. About a dozen court officers stood watch. Family members wore custom shirts printed with Jeremiah's photo and a saying of his. Samantha and her son wore shamrock pins because Jeremiah was killed on St. Patrick's Day and because he loved to pick clover. Defense attorney Sean Chase finally said what had not been said publicly before. On the night of the murders, David Huff had been on Molly. Chase said Huff believed he was hearing voices, that he had a psychotic break. Judge Limpert addressed Huff directly. Jeremiah was only 11 years old, a child with a full life ahead of him. You took that from him and from his family. Your actions are reprehensible, and you deserve to be incarcerated for the rest of your life. Mr. Huff, even a sentence of life is not long enough for you. Then Samantha stood up. She talked about the phone call, the one that plays in her head every single morning when she wakes up and remembers that her son is still gone. She talked about Jeremiah's pets, still sleeping in his room, surrounded by his things, as though they were waiting for him to come home. She told the court she had spent years living in fear of David Huff, that the restraining orders had existed for a reason, that she had genuinely believed he might one day kill her, that she had made peace with that possibility long before March 17th ever came. "But I never imagined," she said, "he would have taken Jeremiah from this world." She ended with one sentence: "You are destined for the 7th circle of hell." Prosecutor Moran then read a letter from Tschudy's mother, Yeraldith Tschudy. The family had moved to Florida. They couldn't be there, but they sent their words. A girl who had crossed continents, the letter said, buried her father, raised a child on her own, worked herself to the bone. That is who David Huff took from this world. Huff was given a chance to speak. He said he was sorry for laughing at the plea. He said none of it was funny. He said he loved everyone in the room. The family screamed back at him. As he was led out to begin his sentence, the gallery erupted. People shouted at him as he walked toward the door. He said nothing. He walked out in silence. 40 years to life. He'll be around 80 years old before he is first eligible for parole. Prosecutor Moran put it plainly. David Huff will likely leave prison in a casket. We still don't know why. The Molly explains a psychotic break. It doesn't explain why he picked up that gun. Why those people? Why that night? No motive was ever established. No answer was ever given. The DA asked that question out loud in the days after the murders. Nobody ever answered it. Some stories don't give you that. This is one of them. If this case stayed with you, share it. Someone out there needs to know Jeremiah's name. Like the video, subscribe for more cases like this, and we'll see you in the next one.